Oh, hey again, this is Philip at thebest3d.com, and I'm going to start a mini series on PD particles, Particle 9, and pretty much everything you can do here, you can also do in PD Artist or PD Howler. So I hope it's going to be educational, and one thing I want to do really is kind of take a close look at each of these tools to kind of see in practical ways how to use them, perhaps for game design, perhaps for just visual art, for illustrations, children's books, whatever comes to mind. And one thing I'll do today is to kind of paint a map and then show the curve tool to add something to that that might be a path going through the map. Right, so initially we'll start with perhaps something like an elevation map for mountains, and there's probably something on the filters we might see. Let's see if we have the render. There you go. There's the rendering for plasma noise. That's a good one to start with. And there are a lot of different types of plasma noises or appearances or styles, especially if you change the color model here to something like HSV, hue saturation value. You get something that's easily used in space art. And then usually you want to add some grayscale conversion to that, perhaps, or reduce the tone of the color and all that. But let's say this is our initial color, but we want to have some other. You can change color 1 and color 2, and sometimes you'll see something that's closer to what you had in mind. If you have them both in about the same tone, it doesn't make much of a difference here with the color model like this. But if you go to something like the two-tone, that's where you have something like red to yellow or green to or blue to green or something like that. So pick the numbers or pick the colors, something like this for higher elevation, perhaps a little bit lighter, and for darker elevation, like a dark brown, something like that. All right, so let's say this is the landscape we're going to have in our map. Maybe we have a story where we're escaping from some bandits that are chasing us because we have a pot of gold and we're going through a maze of rocks and mountains and stuff like that. So this will be a very simple elevation map in this case, just a terrain, right? And maybe we'll also paint some. Let's go right click on our brush tool here and go something like soft pastel, whatever the style is you might like. I'm going to go with one of the oilies, the large loaded large cover. Usually if you hit the space bar, you have a quick color picker, and you can even save your favorite brushes here. You can click it here, so you have that. Oh no, I don't have a preset here, so I need to. What is it I need to do here? Right click to add one. Okay, got it. So go here, get the keyboard focus, and right click, and that will store my current brush in here. Right, and let's say I want to use it with sort of a greenish color. So I'm going to go paint along here, and that's a bit too big. Let's go and undo that. Actually, let's go and redo that. Now you can right click on the undo button, or you can Shift A for again, and that will repaint it along that path. But it's always a little bit different because it has that randomness to it. So Shift A again will give you yet another path in a similar direction. Alright, so let's go and undo that and perhaps make the brush a little bit smaller. And for that I need to be in the brush settings. Well, actually I don't need to, because there's also this context bar here, and I could go and change something like the size here, which is at 100%, get it a little bit smaller. So now what's actually smaller is not so much the spread, but it's those dots, the individual dabs of the brush. Right? So that's the key thing about it, is that we're actually controlling the size of these blobs, of these dabs. Alright, so I'm going to go some sort of a path like this. Alright, and then Shift A to do that again. And now let's see if I'm going to grab another brush, maybe an airbrush, with a little bit of randomness to it. Let's go to the settings right here, where you have some additional options such as random, because if you go exactly along the same path, do the Shift A once more, you see it's going along that in a pretty perfect way, and perhaps we really need to add still a little bit of randomness to that. So let's go undo that and go add some random positional component here. Right, and when we do that, you see it's painting along it up, but at a different scale. So undo that. Let's go back to the original scale and Shift A. There you go. No, that's off too. Okay, so you know what? I'm gonna just paint a new, there you go, a new path, and then we can see how it's actually getting us a little bit of random. Oh, I made the boo-boo here. That's okay. It's just for a demo. So it's a little bit random there, and we can increase that parameter even more. You can also randomize the size a little bit, and that will really look interesting. So let's undo this and try again. So now we have that path. Now it may be a little bit too opaque, so don't forget we have this tool here for the interactive undo. This one here with the arrow back. Interactive undo, you got a slider, you can change or sort of fade away how much of that paint effect you actually want there. So let's say we give it a little bit like this, and now we're going to draw our path. That's where we're going in with the curve tool to do this in yet another way. The path may be a river, right? Maybe this green is really because there is a river going through it in the middle, or a creek, or an almost dry, very thin lake, probably a canyon kind of scenario. And the river might be a different color, so we need to perhaps get ready with a bluish color to paint, but we don't want this blobby thing going there quite yet. We want to also control exactly where that thing is going to go. If I'm going with my hands here and I'm going too fast, I'm going to overshoot, right? So that's no good. And so what I want to do is use the curve tool, which has more of a vector art or vector graphics feel to it. The curve tool, especially I think since version 8 or so, it really, maybe 7 even, it evolved. And what you can do is you can create a couple of clicks, and then it creates a smooth curve going through these clicks. And actually you can have them go through or come close. There's basically a choice of Catmull or B-spline interpolation. And in the Catmull case, that's when it's actually going through the points that you place. All right, so let's clear the curves. That's this one here. Start over with a new curve. And I'm going to start from the outside. And then I'm going to go in just around here. And then I'm going to go like this. And just say exactly where do you want that curve to go. And so here's an interesting thing. You can go a little bit faster. You can go like make a jump here, fairly long distance. And then maybe we need a little contour here, turning around, because maybe there was a rock in the way, or the sediment formation on the ground was harder, and it ended up just needing to find its way for the canyon to go around it. Keep going there and eventually have one point on the outside. Now if we need some extra points, we can click here and insert an extra point. Alright, so these points are hotspots. The moment we get close to it, you can see the hotspot there, and it's going to see that you can grab these points and move them around. Or if you don't have one, you can click here and insert the new one. Alright, now sometimes they're too close to each other and you don't want to insert a new one, so you can actually control some of that behavior up here. Be sure to try every one of these functions there. And the one we'll be focusing on though now is to render that along this path. Right? So you have the curve, and what you want to do is essentially finish it right here. Finish by using the current brush and stroke a brush along that path. Right? So let's do that once. And there it is. Now that was too big, so you can do an undo and focus on the brush itself. And so here we can go and say, okay, we need that a little bit smaller. Oops, redo and go. No, that's not it. Undo, and where's my render? There. All right. So once again, we have the size of the dabs, but we really want the whole random spread to be a little bit contained. Well, that's the brush settings here. So keep this one pinned and reduce the randomness there to a much smaller distance, and the size we can keep randomized, and undo this one and now repaint and finish it right here. And there you go. Now we have this river going through it in a much more contained way than the initial blob with the green. And we're starting to look like a river surrounded by forests and trees, because we have that randomness to it. And you're going to start looking, it's going to start looking like we have some green leaves and branches and forests overlapping the river. And that's exactly what we kind of want to add to it, to give it a little bit more than just a very clean perfect. Now we could also do this now to have the, because right now here it looks like the blue is the one that's on top, because this blob here kind of cut out a portion of the green, and we may want to actually have the green going over it one more time in order to give it a chance to overlap over the blue, but not over altogether and hide it. So what we should do is hide the or protect the blue part, right? Place a mask there with the selection tool or with the magic wand. Find the magic wand tool and select something like the green area. Now you need to give it some tolerance so that it's not contained to just one value of, excuse me, the blue area, right? Give it a little bit of tolerance, not too much, because what you want to do is really find the inner part of the river, not too much to the outside. So find something like 30 perhaps or so. There you go, and that will find all the blue values that are similar. Oh, it missed a few here because it must be short and not reach it. So use the shift key to click another one here and add to that selection, right? Click around here, so now you have the bridge going through, and that selection, if it's too wide, if you want it to actually become an even more narrow creek, you can do a couple of things with that. You can smooth it and then narrow it down, or shrink it, right, even without smoothing. So that would be under the selection. Of course, you have a couple of tools there, including grow it and shrink it. So if you shrink it, then you'll see, even just by 1 unit, you'll see it come towards the inside of the river. And do that one more time perhaps. Shrink it one more time. And so now we have a river that's starting to dry out here. It's a very narrow creek. Let's blur it a little bit. That's another one that we can also use, and just a tiny little bit. And so now it's a bit more, less argumentative, less going in and out in this, a little bit more of a contained area. And then do some more. There's also an adjust option here where you can adjust the value and actually then see it as a grayscale temporarily. So I would encourage you to do that so that it kind of narrows it down, but once it has the river, you have it brighter, and or work with the contrast as well. And with that, you'll get a selection that's even tighter. Now, let's say we want to make that the protection mask. So this area should not be painted. One thing I'd recommend we store this selection, because we spend quite a bit of time to do something, to develop it, so we probably ought to store it. And up here there's a couple of icons to store the image, store the brush, store the selection. This one here, store a copy of the selection. So you have a copy right here, that way you can get back to it if you need to, right? And in fact, you can even paint on it right there. You can go make this a little bit bigger. Right, and for instance, if you see some parts are drying up here and didn't quite make it, you can go to the paint mode, right, and set the size of the brush and just paint that selection right in there, a couple of dabs, maybe a little bit smaller, and maybe smear it too. There's a little smear tool to kind of blur it around there. So anyway, so that's some of the gray tools, and then replace this, replace the current selection with this selection, right, and put that on in place. Alright, so we have this. Let's go back to our river. We want to keep it blue inside, but then allow the green to overlap on the outside. So we're going to invert the selection. Right now, click the invert here, or click it up here if you want to invert the one that's directly here already. You can do a select by, what is it, overlay, color overlay. That will show you, it's going to be tinted with pink if it's not selected. Now pink to blue becomes a dark blue. So if it's not inverted, let's click that again, then you'll see the outside gets that pink tint, and the inside still shows the blue of the river, right? But if you invert it, now you see the blue is protected and the outside is not. It's showing its original color. So that's where we can now go and repaint this curve one more time. So let's go back to the curve tool where it remembers the path we had last. Right, it's still there, and we can say, okay, then let's go back to the brush settings with a little bit more of a random position, a little bit bigger spread on that, and also the color, make it green. Now we need to pick that color. Let's just pick it right here with the turkey baster or the color picker, right? Let's grab some of the green we had earlier. There you go, and we're ready to go and re-render. Where's my curve? Here's my curve tool. Let's go and finish it. And now we have the green painted over. I'm going to use a slightly different green so we can see it better against the existing one already. Right, maybe I'm going to change the brightness and the saturation here. I'm going to add some random saturation. right? And some random hue even. So some of it is going to be a little bit more on the reddish side, a little bit more on the yellowish side, and hopefully not too much on the blue. And then some of the trees will also be a little bit brighter than others, so add some random on that, and now do the finish. And the curve, now you see some trees, it seems, that are a slightly different color. We want them a different size also, and some of them much bigger. Right, so let's go random position, probably even a little bit more. And what else could we do? That's a little bit adding some randomness to it. Well, let's just use that for now and go finish. So there you go. So now we have some extra trees. Now the rivers at point, there are some parts where the river should be covered even more. So maybe we need to narrow this selection even more. Now we don't need to narrow it because we did invert it, which means we need to actually expand the one on the outside so that the remaining part that's currently protected gets even more narrow. Right, so we either shrink it or expand it depending on which way we want that to grow. Right now this one is not selected. We want it to get even smaller. We need to increase the size of the selection. We need to expand or grow the selection. Let's go to the selection and find our grow and shrink tool. This time we'll grow it, and we'll grow it by 1 unit, and you see how it's coming to the inside of the river and covering even more of that. Let's do that one more time, just once. Grow like this, and then blur it a tiny little bit. All right, so it's actually able to, there you go, maybe 1 or 2 units, precise, and now we have just little islands of river. Right? That means if we actually painting our grass, let's go back to this here, paint our green, some of it is going to start covering even more of the river. Right? So let's go there 1 or 2 more times. And so now here we have something that looks a bit more realistic, where we actually see only part of that Amazon River, or whatever that may represent, right? Because the trees are growing all around it and hiding it. All right, so that's about it when it comes to creating a map. For a top view down approach, combining a variety of brushes with that curve tool, which I really think is an amazing tool to create all sorts of really fascinating alternates. Even just moving this around, you know, especially if you have the ability still to paint there and you wanted to show another branch of a river that used to go this way, you could definitely do that quite easily. Just paint here. And there are some leftover dry, click again and again, and maybe there is no more river going through it, but you do have another branch that maybe a couple of 100 years ago expanded over there, and you can see another evolution of trees still remaining in that areas as well. All right, well, thanks for watching. Hope that's going to be even more educational in the next one. Please come back, and again, remember you can do this with PD Particles, which currently is on sale for just $3.50, and just to the end of or early October. And you can do this also, of course, with PD Howler, which is the superset of everything. Then there's PD Artist in between, and we'll take a look at some other tools that can help you take your game a little bit further. Thanks for watching.